So we've got our 94 Dodge in here on the lift, the Cummins Diesel. Today we're going to do an oil change. We're going to check the fluid levels in the front and rear end. We're going to check the transfer case, which we know is low because it's got a bad seal. We actually have the seal. We're going to put that in. We're going to grease the front end, and we're going to check all the U-joints while we're at it. So let's get started. We're going to grab a wrench. This particular oil plug takes a 3/8 ratchet to take the oil plug out with. And you do want to make sure you got a large enough drain pan. This Cummins holds 2.5 gallons of oil. Now while that's draining, we're going to go ahead and grease it. Unlike the little car, just about everything's greasable on this thing. I like to clean a little bit of the dirt off the grease fitting first. The bottom ball joints. And then the front U-joint, which we have to find the grease fitting. It'll be inside one of the crosses here if it has a grease fitting. Not all U-joints are greasable. Drag link. I want to grease the universal joints in our dry shaft while we check them. There, so everything is greased. All the U-joints look good. So while that's draining, we'll go ahead and see if we can get the dry shaft out. So the first thing we have to do is take the dry shaft off the rear end. Millimeter, yep. And then so there's 4 little bolts here that hold the caps on. You have to take out. We'll set them up on the arm of the lift so we don't lose them. anybody's got any good recommendations for shop lights, leave them down below for me. You know, for work lights. I've got lights on the ceiling, obviously, but something that I can see under the truck. And there's a strap that goes on there as well. And then we do the bottom two. When you do the bottom two, you want to be a little careful you don't lose the dry shaft down out of there as you get close. There is, on this truck, there is an ear on the yoke that holds it in, so you're pretty safe. You know, what you're trying not to do is you don't want to lose the needle bearings out of the universal joint, or you'll be picking them up, cleaning them up, and trying to put them back in there, or replacing the universal joint. In this case, it's all good. We don't want to have to put a new joint in, so we're going to be careful. And one of the things I was never aware of is these caps, these straps and bolts. I was told by my local auto parts store, they recommend changing those every time you change a universal joint. I was not aware of that. Sort of makes sense though, because they're just little sheet metal straps and they probably do stretch some. So now we're going to get a pry bar to pop that loose. It would probably come out all on its own without too much trouble. But again, knowing we want to be careful, we're going to go ahead and get up in there for a pry bar and just loosen it up. Make sure we loosen up both sides. Just like that. I'm going to slide it down out of there. And in this particular truck, it just slides out of the transfer case. So we're just going to hold the whole dry shaft and slide it right out like that, set it right down on the floor, out of our way. So now we'll get you under here so you can see what we're trying to accomplish. How about we put you right there? I think that's a pretty good spot. Let's go get some light. We'll be right back. That's not too bad. A little hard to see, but right up in here is that seal where the dry shaft slid right in there. And this is the one that keeps leaking. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get that out of there. We have a seal puller. I'm not sure it's going to get in there, but we'll go get it and try it. There is a lip though that we might be able to pop it out with a screwdriver. So we've got our seal puller. We're going to see if we can get in there and yank that seal out. There we go. Just like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up real well. We're going to get our new seal and we're going to drive it in there. A little bit of brake clean. And now's a good time to check that shaft too. You see there's no play in that shaft. If there was a lot of play in that, you would never keep a seal in it. I think what happened is we put the, I don't know if the seal didn't seal well, no pun intended, but on the case right here, there's a little spot right there. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of silicone on the new seal when we put it in, just to ensure that it seals. So I don't think it was leaking between the rubber and the dry shaft. I think it was leaking between the tin seal and the aluminum transfer case. So here's our new seal. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit of silicone right around that lip right there. Not a lot, just enough to take care of any imperfections. Another thing you want to look for too when you're having a problem like this is look for something in the dry shaft where the seal rides on the shaft itself. Look and see if there's a big groove bore in there. Sometimes after lots and lots of miles, the seal will actually wear a groove into the steel of the shaft or the crankshaft or wherever that seal may be. In this case, that's not the issue, but just in case. So we don't have a seal driver big enough, so we're just going to go ahead and get it started with our hammer. Taking a little time to get it square. You'll hear that bottom out. You'll hear the noise change drastically when the seal bottoms out. And you saw a little bit of silicone come out around there. So we're going to hope for the best on that one and put our dry shaft back in. So as I mentioned, that end of the dry shaft slides right in the transfer case. So we're going to put our strap back on. Be careful not to lose our dry shaft. And you know, oil leaks aren't all bad in Maine because vehicles rust out so quick here because of the salt and stuff they put on the roads. Having a little undercoating is not always a bad thing. The issue with this one in the transfer case was it was leaking bad enough that we were worried we were going to run it low on fluid. You know, my general rule of thumb is if the leak is not bad enough to cause you enough fluid loss to have to deal with it before the next oil change, it's probably okay. So where this holds 2.5 gallons of oil, if it leaks a quart of oil in an oil change, I'm not really worried about that. If it leaked a gallon and I had to keep checking it and adding to it, then I would try to get it, you know, remedied. In this case, the transfer case was using about 3 quarts of oil in between oil changes, which means we really had to check it a lot. And you'll see here in a minute. We're going to fill it up in a minute and you'll see just how low it is. And the U-joint should fit into this yoke pretty snug. If there's a lot of shiny spots and you can tell things have been moving and the yoke is worn, then you might want to replace it, because if things are moving around in there under normal use, they're not going to last. You're going to end up breaking something. All right, let's go ahead and fill up the transfer case. I'll bring you back in so you can watch what we're doing. So basically, what we have to do is we have to pull this plug out, this top plug. Top plug is a fill port, the bottom plug right there is a drain port. So we're gonna pull the fill plug and then we're gonna fill it until it trickles out. So you hold on a minute, we're gonna get some tools. Okay, so we have our Allen socket. There we go. In our case, it's a 10 millimeter, it appears. 3/8 will also work. It's just a little loose. In our case, it comes out real easy because, well, we take it out quite frequently. Okay, so we're using an ATF +4 because that's what we have. It basically uses an automatic transmission fluid. And like I say, we're just going to fill it up until it runs out. I don't know if you guys can hear Fred. Our rooster Fred likes to make himself known. And you see that run out of there now. That is full. You can always stick your pinky in there too and make sure it comes out wet. So in our case, in case you were counting, that was almost 3 quarts low, which is almost what it actually holds. So we're hoping that seal does the trick. All right, so let's put our drain plug back in the oil pan. We're going to check the front and rear end, and then we'll let it down and fill up the oil. All right, drain plug's back in. We're going to go out so you can see the rear end and we'll check the fluid in that. So the rear end uses a 1/2-inch ratchet. Fits right into the plug. And if the plug is too dirty, you might want to clean it out so you don't strip something out. And this is sort of the same way. It should sort of just want to trickle out of there or be right at it. So we can just take our finger, reach down in there, and the gear oil is right there. So we're happy with that. We're not going to bother to add any to that. So we'll go check the front. All right, this is probably hard to see. The plug on the front end is right in here behind this tie rod end. And this one does have some stuff in the hole, so we're going to clean it out with the screwdriver. And that one is 3/8 drive, so we got our 3/8 ratchet. And this one's the same way. It should be right there, and it is. So we don't have to worry about that. Usually on the front and rear end, if you're not seeing a leak somewhere, it's not going to be down. It's one of those things where gear oil is pretty messy when it leaks, even the slightest little bit. So if it's running out somewhere, you're probably going to see it. Problem is with these Cummins, or at least this Cummins, it leaks enough oil, which it's not a ton of oil, but you know, a quart of oil every oil change, it just sort of saturates everything under here. So it tends to be hard to understand where the leak's coming from. So let's let this down and get it filled up and check the rest of the fluids and wrap this up. Alright, so once I drain the oil, I get it back on its feet. The very first thing I want to do before I get sidetracked, my phone rings, somebody stops for a beer, whatever the case, I want to get a funnel in that oil fill. And that way, no matter what happens, that should clue me when I come back. If I get distracted, there is no oil in this, don't start it. So let's go get 2.5 gallons of Rotella. Okay, so we're running just a Rotella 1540 diesel oil. There's a lot of synthetics and stuff you can run. This has been around for a long time. We've had good luck with it, so it's what we use. And one of the things we do here in the shop is inside our toolbox, we've got a list of all the vehicles on the property and how many quarts or gallons of oil they hold. So I don't have to look it up, I don't have to remember it, I don't have to even check the dipstick. I mean, I do check the dipstick, but I don't have to. I can just go ahead and dump in what I have written down that it takes. I can then start it, check for leaks, and make sure I have no issue. So once we get this 2.5 gallons in, then we're going to change the oil filter. Might seem a little out of sequence, but again, it makes me nervous having a vehicle sitting around with no oil in it. And as long as we don't start it, we will not mix up the oil. And one thing we do here around the homestead is we probably change our oils way too frequently. You know, you look at something like a new Ford Focus, for example. My daughter has a 2018 Ford Focus. I believe they say 10,000 miles or something on the synthetic oil. This stuff, while it is expensive, it's not expensive compared to a vehicle. If I was to go buy this truck new today, equivalent to this truck, I don't even know what it would cost. It's probably $60,000–$70,000. So, you know, a few bucks on an oil change a little more frequently to make things last really is not going to hurt anything. Alright, so we'll take care of our funnel. We'll get the air filter out so that we can change the oil filter. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Okay, so to change the oil filter, I find it easiest to take the air filter out. And there's a regular screw, basically like a hose clamp on the turbo, on the boot. Loosen that up a bit, take your boot off your turbo, and the whole air filter housing lifts right off the inner fender. And then our oil filter is right down in here. So we're going to move our drain pan to catch our spill, and then we'll take that off. See if we can do this without knocking you guys over. I use these filter pliers. They work really well. There is a positive cable on the back of the alternator right there. It does have a plastic cover on it though, so it's pretty safe, but just something to be conscious of. We'll take that off and let it drain. And there's our filter. As you go to put your new filter on, you want to make sure you got a little oil on that O-ring, and you want to make sure the O-ring is on the old filter. If it's stuck up in there, you won't get a good seal. Possibly have an oil leak, run the engine out of oil. Now, this filter you could actually fill ahead of time. And I normally do. I get out of sequence this time with the video camera, so I normally stop short filling the engine, and I fill the rest in the filter. But any of you that have these Cummins know that the first 20 minutes they don't have oil pressure anyways, it seems like. It'll fill that filter pretty quick. And you want to snug it up, but you don't want to crank it up because it will tighten up over time. So that's the oil filter. We're done with that. Now's a good time to just reach in and grab a hold of the turbo. Make sure there's no play in it. Shouldn't have any play in or out or side to side. Seems all good. We're going to put the air filter back in. Alright, so the last couple things we're going to do is we're going to check the antifreeze, we're going to check the brake fluid, and we're going to wrap this up. So I like to take the cap off, check this. Now the engine hasn't been run for a while, so it's nice and cool. And that's right up there where it needs to be. We did just check this the other day when we checked how cold it's good for before it'll freeze. You know, we went ahead and checked all that. We know it's good down to about -40. And our overflow tank is a little down, so we'll go ahead and put a little in that. This engine does have a couple hoses that leak a little when it's really cold first thing in the morning. This little crossover hose here leaks a little right here, and this hose here leaks a little right down in there. And I've tried tightening, I've tried new hoses. I think that the only solution I have is to take it off, put some sealant on it of some kind. Fill our window wash while we're here after we cap this up. Clean up our battery. Now, we're going to look at our battery terminals. Everything's good and clean there. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to check the power steering fluid, which is way buried down in here. So you'll have to take my word for it. And it's got plenty, so we're good to go. And our brake fluid. Now the brake fluid, you can actually see the tank is a little, not completely see-through, but it's fairly see-through. And I can see the fluid is right up about here. And I wiggle it a little bit, so I'm not going to take that apart. So that's pretty much it for getting this thing ready. We are going to change the fuel filter. Well, we already did change the fuel filter, I'm sorry. We did that earlier. We changed the tires earlier. We'll try to leave those links to those videos down below. So we've done the fuel filter, we've done the oil filter, the oil, we've checked all the fluids, front and rear, and we put the new seal in the transfer case. The only thing we really have left to do to the old Dodge is the driver's rocker panel is really rusted out. We have a new one here. We really want to get that done before snow really starts flying. So probably in the next 2 or 3 days, you're going to see us changing that rocker panel. We're going to try to fit it in between doing some sheetrock in the house and a few other projects. So appreciate you watching. Any questions, leave them down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.